Let me tell you what we're really seeing here in this developing story. There is real legal pressure around Donald Trump. That part is clear. But there are also some rumors that people online have stretched far beyond what we can actually prove. When those two things get mixed together, people get confused, very confused. So let's slow down, keep it simple, and stick to what's real. I've lived long enough to know this. When the noise gets loud, and boy is it loud right now, the most important thing you can do is separate what's verified from what's whispered. Here's how I think about it. The verified facts are quiet. They don't shout. They just sit there in court documents and official filings, waiting for people to actually read them. Rumors, on the other hand, shout. They spread fast. They get repeated and amplified and twisted until nobody remembers what the original claim even was. But truth? Well, truth works at its own pace. Always has. It doesn't care about the news cycle or social media or what's trending. It just unfolds step by step the way it's going to unfold. And if you want to understand what's really happening, you've got to be patient enough to let the truth reveal itself. So here's what we actually know, not what we've heard or what someone said they heard or what's being whispered in anonymous forums. Former President Trump is facing several major legal cases at the same time. That's not speculation, that's fact. These include the federal classified documents case, the one with allegations about handling sensitive materials after leaving office. That case is real. It's documented. It's moving through the courts. There's also the federal special counsel investigation into election interference. Again, not a rumor. This is an active legal matter with charges, filings, court dates, the whole 9 yards. And then you've got the criminal case in Georgia. This one's alleging attempts to overturn the 2020 election results in that state. Multiple defendants, multiple charges, a complex RICO case that's been in the news for months. These are all public, documented, widely reported by major news outlets, not fringe websites or anonymous blogs, but established, credible news organizations. No debate there. These cases exist. They're real. They're ongoing. Now, we also know something else that's been confirmed, something important to understand. Legal experts, and I'm talking about constitutional scholars, former prosecutors, people who actually practice law for a living, they've repeatedly explained that spousal privilege is not absolute in the United States. A lot of people don't realize this. They think, well, you can't make a spouse testify against their husband or wife. That's just the rule. But it's more complicated than that. A spouse can be asked to testify in certain criminal matters. Not in all cases, mind you, but in certain situations, particularly when it comes to serious criminal allegations, the courts decide how far that privilege goes. That's not a rumor. That's settled law. It's been tested in courtrooms many times over the years. We have precedents. We have legal frameworks. We know how this works. Now, does that mean Melania Trump has testified? Does it mean she's been compelled to appear before a grand jury or answer questions under oath? Well, that's where we get into murkier territory, because those proceedings, if they happened, would likely be sealed. Grand jury testimony is confidential. We wouldn't necessarily know about it right away or maybe at all, depending on how the legal process unfolds. And that's where the rumors start creeping in. You see, when there's uncertainty, when there are gaps in what the public knows, people fill those gaps with speculation. Sometimes educated speculation, sometimes wild guessing. And on the internet, in our current media environment, those speculations spread like wildfire. Someone says, I heard that Melania might have been called to testify. Then someone else says, I heard she actually did testify. Then a third person says, I heard her testimony was devastating and it changes everything. And before you know it, you've got headlines screaming about leaked testimony and broken inner circles and game-changing revelations. But here's the thing. We don't actually know if any of that is true. Not yet, anyway. Could it be true? Sure, it's possible. The legal framework exists for it to happen, and in cases this serious, prosecutors often do try to compel testimony from people close to the defendant. But possible isn't the same as confirmed, and that's a crucial distinction. Now, let's talk about what would happen if Melania Trump were called to testify just hypothetically, because understanding the mechanics helps us think clearly about the situation. First, prosecutors would have to convince a judge that her testimony is necessary and that spousal privilege shouldn't apply. That's not automatic. They'd have to make an argument, present reasons, show why her testimony is important to the case. Second, even if she were compelled to testify, there would likely be limits on what she could be asked. Courts are careful about this stuff. They try to balance the need for evidence against privacy concerns and the special nature of marriage. Third, and this is important, grand jury proceedings are secret. If she testified before a grand jury, we wouldn't necessarily know about it. Witnesses are typically prohibited from discussing their testimony. Prosecutors can't talk about it. Even the defendant might not know the specifics unless and until it becomes relevant in open court. So all these claims about leaked testimony? Well, they're immediately suspicious because real grand jury testimony doesn't usually leak. When it does, it's a serious violation that can lead to criminal charges for whoever did the leaking. What we're seeing instead, I think, is a lot of people connecting dots that may or may not be there. They know Trump is under legal pressure. That's real. They know spousal privilege isn't absolute. That's real too. They know Melania has been notably absent from some public events and has maintained a certain distance from the political fray, also observable and documented. So they put all that together and think, aha, she must have testified against him. That explains everything. But that's not how evidence works. That's not how you reach solid conclusions. You can't just take a bunch of true facts, add some reasonable assumptions, and leap to a dramatic conclusion without any actual proof. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying nothing's happening behind the scenes. In cases this big, this complex, there's always more going on than the public knows about. Prosecutors are doing their work, defense teams are doing theirs, witnesses are being interviewed, documents are being reviewed, legal strategies are being developed and refined. And yes, it's entirely possible, even likely, that people close to Trump, including family members, have been approached by investigators, have been asked questions, have had to make decisions about cooperation and testimony. That's just how these things work. It's standard procedure in major criminal investigations. But standard procedure doesn't make for dramatic headlines. So what happens is people take that baseline reality and inflate it. They add details that sound plausible but aren't confirmed. They create narratives that fit what they want to believe or what gets the most attention. And pretty soon you've got a story that's 10% fact and 90% speculation, but it's being shared and discussed as if it's all verified truth. So what's the responsible way to think about all this? Well, here's my approach, and it's served me pretty well over the years. Start with what you know for certain. In this case, Trump faces serious legal cases. Spousal privilege has limits. The legal system is working through these cases methodically. Acknowledge what's possible but unconfirmed. Melania could have been asked to testify. Her testimony, if it exists, could be significant. These are reasonable possibilities given what we know about how the legal system works. But don't confuse possibility with certainty. Don't treat rumors as facts just because they sound dramatic or because they fit a particular narrative you find compelling. And most importantly, be patient. The truth will come out. It always does eventually. Maybe not on the timeline we'd prefer, maybe not in the dramatic fashion we've imagined, but the real facts will emerge through official channels, court filings, trial testimony, official statements from attorneys. When that happens, we'll know what's real and what was just noise. Until then, the wisest thing we can do is maintain a healthy skepticism about unverified claims, no matter how sensational they sound. Because in my experience, and I've been watching these kinds of situations unfold for a very long time, the most dramatic rumors are usually the least accurate. The real story is almost always more complicated, more nuanced, and less exciting than what people are claiming online. But it's also more important because it's true. And at the end of the day, truth is what matters. Not clicks, not viral tweets, not sensational headlines, just the facts, presented clearly and honestly, so people can make up their own minds about what it all means. That's the standard we should hold ourselves to, especially when the noise is deafening. Well, we also know from public reporting that Melania Trump has been watching her husband's legal problems closely. Former aides, people who've worked in Trump's orbit over the years, they've said she follows the news carefully. She's not oblivious to what's happening. She's paying attention, reading the coverage, staying informed about the cases and the developments. And that makes sense, right? I mean, of course she would. This is her husband we're talking about. These are serious legal matters that could affect their family, their finances, their future. You'd have to be pretty detached not to follow something like that. But here's the critical distinction, and I really want you to understand this because it's where a lot of the confusion comes in. Watching a case is not the same as cooperating with prosecutors. Not even close. You can follow every news story, read every court filing, watch every hearing, and that doesn't mean you're involved in the case itself. It just means you're informed. It means you're aware of what's going on. Cooperation is something else entirely. Cooperation means talking to investigators, answering questions, providing documents, maybe testifying under oath. That's active involvement in the legal process. And that is where the rumors begin to sprint far ahead of the facts. Because here's what we actually know right now, as of this moment. There is no verified evidence that Melania Trump has been subpoenaed. There's no verified evidence that she has testified before a grand jury or in any other proceeding. There is no verified evidence that she has cooperated with federal investigators in any capacity. None of those claims, and they're all over the internet, they're in comment sections, they're being discussed on social media, none of them have been confirmed yet by a court document or a named government official. And listen, I've been around long enough to know how this works. If a subpoena had been issued to a former First Lady, we'd probably know about it through official channels. There would be court filings. There would be legal motions. Defense attorneys would be responding to it publicly. If testimony had been given, especially testimony as significant as what people are claiming, there would be traces of it in the legal record. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in full detail, but there would be something. Until that happens, until we see actual documentation, actual confirmation from people whose names are attached to the information, these claims remain only that, rumors. Now, that doesn't mean they're definitely false. I'm not saying that. Could Melania have been approached by investigators? Sure, it's possible. Could there be sealed proceedings we don't know about yet? Absolutely. That happens all the time in federal cases. But possible isn't the same as proven, and we need to be honest about that distinction. So what makes these rumors travel so fast? Why do they spread like wildfire even without solid evidence? Well, it's the size of the legal cloud around the former president. When someone is involved in several high-stakes cases at once, and we're talking about multiple federal investigations, multiple state cases, multiple areas of law, all happening simultaneously. Every small report gets blown up into something much bigger. Think about it like this. If you heard a rumor about an ordinary person being involved in a minor legal matter, you probably wouldn't pay much attention. You might not even remember it an hour later. But when it's about someone at the center of multiple major legal battles, when it's someone the entire country is already watching closely, well, that same rumor takes on a life of its own. People share it. They speculate about what it means. They connect it to other rumors and other cases. And when it's a former president, someone who held the highest office in the land, someone who's still a major political figure, people jump straight to dramatic conclusions. That's human nature. I've seen it happen over and over again in different contexts. Big name, big stakes, big assumptions. We fill in the blanks. We imagine the most dramatic scenarios. We assume the worst or the best depending on our perspective, and we treat those assumptions as if they're facts, even when they're really just educated guesses at best. Now, mixed into all of this, and this is where things get really wild, some online commentators have been whispering about an emergency impeachment and a cabinet collapse. Let me be very clear about this. There is zero verified evidence of any such process underway. Zero. No official impeachment articles have been filed. You can check the congressional record. You can look at the House of Representatives' official activities. There's nothing there. No cabinet resignations tied to an emergency. None. The cabinet serves the current president, and there's been no mass exodus, no dramatic resignations linked to any Trump crisis. No legal or constitutional moves pointing in that direction whatsoever. These ideas, and I want to be gentle here, but also honest, these ideas appear to come from speculation, not from any governmental action. And you know what? I understand why this happens. People are trying to make sense of a complicated situation. They see all these legal cases. They hear about pressure building. They know historically that political crises can escalate quickly, so they start gaming out scenarios in their heads. Well, if this happens, then maybe that happens, and then this other thing could happen. And before you know it, you've got a whole elaborate theory about emergency impeachments and constitutional crises and governments collapsing. But here's what I've learned over many years of watching these kinds of situations unfold. Reality is usually much more boring than the dramatic scenarios people imagine, and it usually takes much longer than people expect. The legal system moves slowly, deliberately. There are procedures, there are processes, there are checks and balances specifically designed to prevent things from happening too quickly or too dramatically. And impeachment isn't something that just happens overnight because of rumors or speculation. It requires an official process. The House has to bring charges. There has to be evidence presented. There has to be a vote. Then the Senate has to hold a trial. That's not a quick process, and it's not a secret process. We'd know if it was happening. Similarly, the idea of a cabinet collapse, well, that doesn't really make sense in this context. Trump isn't currently president. He doesn't have a cabinet right now. The current cabinet serves whoever the current president is, and their positions aren't affected by Trump's legal troubles. Now, could there be turmoil in Trump's political organization? Could advisors be resigning or distancing themselves? Could his inner circle be experiencing tension and fractures? Sure, that's entirely possible. In fact, it would be surprising if there wasn't some stress and strain given everything that's happening. But that's different from a cabinet collapse. That's just normal organizational dynamics under pressure. People make decisions about their own careers and their own involvement. Some stay loyal, some create distance. That happens in every organization facing serious challenges. No, it's not a constitutional crisis. It's just people making choices about their own futures. So here's where we actually are, if we strip away all the noise and all the speculation. Donald Trump faces serious legal challenges. That's verified. That's real. That's documented. Those challenges are complex, multi-jurisdictional, and ongoing. Also true, people close to Trump, family members, advisors, associates, may be involved in these legal processes in various ways. That's standard in investigations of this magnitude. It's expected. But the specific details about who's testified, what they've said, whether they're cooperating, most of that is unknown to the public right now. What's being claimed online often goes far beyond what we can actually verify. The legal system is working through these cases at its own pace. Prosecutors are building their cases. Defense teams are mounting their defenses. Courts are making decisions. All of that is happening, but it's happening largely behind closed doors until it becomes part of the public record. What does this mean for us, practically speaking? Well, it means we need to be patient, and we need to be careful about what we believe and what we share. When you see a dramatic claim, especially one that doesn't cite specific sources or official documents, ask yourself, is this verified? Is this coming from a credible source? Or is this someone speculating based on assumptions? When you hear about leaked testimony or emergency impeachments or other sensational developments, look for the documentation. Look for the official confirmation. Don't just accept it because it sounds plausible or because it fits what you want to believe. And remember, the most important developments in these cases will eventually become part of the public record. They'll show up in court filings. They'll be reported by credible news organizations with actual sources. They'll be confirmed by people willing to put their names to the information. When that happens, we'll know it's real. We'll be able to evaluate it on its merits. We'll be able to have informed discussions about what it means. Until then, we're mostly dealing with a mix of verified facts and unverified speculation. And it's crucial, absolutely crucial, that we don't confuse the two. Because here's the thing about rumors in situations like this. They don't just spread misinformation. They actually make it harder to understand what's really happening. When you've got 50 different theories floating around, when everyone's claiming to know the real story, when dramatic predictions are being made every day, well, the actual truth gets drowned out in all that noise. And that serves nobody's interests, not Trump's, not his critics, not the public's, because we all have a stake in understanding what's actually happening in our legal and political systems. We deserve accurate information. We deserve verified facts. We deserve to know what's real and what's speculation. And the only way we get that is by maintaining standards, by insisting on evidence, by being willing to say, I don't know yet, when we don't actually know. Now, I know that's not as exciting as the dramatic narratives people are spinning online. It's not as satisfying as having all the answers right now. But it's honest, it's accurate, and in the long run, it's the only approach that actually helps us understand what's happening. Because the truth, the real truth, not the rumors or the speculation or the wishful thinking, the truth is what matters. And it's worth waiting for. Even when the wait is frustrating, even when the uncertainty is uncomfortable, even when everyone around us is claiming to know things they don't actually know. The truth works at its own pace, and eventually it reveals itself. Our job is to be patient enough and disciplined enough to wait for it. But even though those rumors are not yet verified, I understand why they appear. I really do. Because American history gives people plenty of examples to point to real examples, historical precedents that are seared into our collective memory. We've had sitting officials face sudden legal or political shocks before. This isn't completely new territory for the country, even if the specific circumstances are unique. We had President Nixon, who was forced to resign when Watergate reached the Oval Office. That was a constitutional crisis unlike anything we'd seen before. The President of the United States, facing impeachment, choosing to step down rather than go through the process. It shook the nation to its core. We had President Clinton, who was impeached during a legal scandal. Different circumstances, different outcome. He was acquitted by the Senate and finished his term. But still, it showed that even sitting presidents aren't immune from legal and political accountability. We've had governors and senators removed or prosecuted while still in office. State executives led away in handcuffs, powerful legislators facing corruption charges. It's happened more times than most people realize. So you see, when people look at the current storm around Trump, when they see multiple legal cases, mounting pressure, institutional scrutiny, they remember those past events. They remember how quickly things can unravel when legal and political crises collide, and they start imagining that something similar must be happening again. That's how fear works, by the way. And I don't mean that in a critical way. I mean it as an observation about human psychology. Fear fills in the blanks. When we don't have complete information, when there are gaps in what we know, uncertainties about what's happening behind closed doors, our minds naturally try to complete the picture. We reach for familiar patterns. We remember past crises and assume the current one must follow a similar path. It's not irrational. It's just how we're wired. We look for patterns. We try to predict outcomes based on what we've seen before. But here's the truth, spoken plainly. The only confirmed events at this moment are the ongoing legal cases. Those are real. Those are documented. Those are moving through the courts with all the weight and seriousness they deserve. The rest, the dramatic theories about testimony and impeachments and collapses, that's speculation, not fact. And we need to be honest about that distinction, even when it's tempting to treat speculation as fact, because it fits a narrative we find compelling. Now, having said all that, even without the rumors, the real situation is serious enough. It's very serious, actually. When a political figure faces several active investigations at the same time, not just one, but multiple cases in different jurisdictions covering different alleged violations, it takes attention, time, energy, and focus away from everything else. Think about what that means practically. Every morning, you're getting briefings from legal teams. Every afternoon, you're reviewing documents and strategy. Every evening, you're preparing responses to new developments. And that's before you even get to the public-facing part, the statements, the messaging, the political consequences. Legal fights are expensive, not just financially, though they certainly are that. I'm talking about tens of millions of dollars in legal fees across multiple cases. That's money that could be going to campaigns, to operations, to other priorities. Instead, it's going to attorneys. But it's also expensive in other ways. They demand lawyers not just one or two, but teams of specialists, constitutional experts, trial attorneys, appeals specialists, people who understand federal procedure, state procedure, the nuances of each different jurisdiction. They demand preparation, endless preparation, reading thousands of pages of documents, preparing witnesses, anticipating the prosecution's strategy, developing counter-strategies. They demand constant public response, because in high-profile cases, you're not just fighting in the courtroom. You're fighting in the court of public opinion, too. Every development needs a response. Every headline needs context. Every accusation needs a rebuttal. None of that leaves a person with much bandwidth, and I mean that literally. Whether you're a business owner trying to run companies, or a candidate trying to campaign for office, or an office holder trying to govern, you simply don't have the mental space, the time, or the energy to do all of those things at full capacity when you're also fighting multiple legal battles. Something has to give, always does. And when these cases involve highly sensitive subjects, boy, Do they when they involve things like classified documents and national election processes? Well, the stakes rise on every side. It's not just about one person anymore. It becomes bigger than that. It becomes not just a personal legal problem, but a national institutional question. What does it mean for our security systems when classified documents are allegedly mishandled? How do we protect sensitive information? What protocols need to be strengthened? What does it mean for our electoral systems when there are allegations of interference or attempts to overturn results? How do we ensure confidence in elections? How do we protect the integrity of democratic processes? These aren't abstract questions. They're fundamental issues about how our institutions function and how they maintain legitimacy. Courts get involved at every level: federal courts, state courts, appellate courts, judges making decisions that could set precedents for decades to come. Congress pays attention. Oversight committees, investigations, hearings, both parties watching closely to see how it affects their political calculations. Agencies tighten procedures. The Justice Department, the National Archives, state election boards, everyone's reassessing protocols, making sure there are safeguards in place for the future. Allies and partners watch closely. And I'm not just talking about political allies. I'm talking about international partners, foreign governments, intelligence agencies around the world. They're all watching to see how the United States handles this because it affects their confidence in American institutions. Everything becomes heavier when the issues touch on national security and democratic processes. The personal becomes political. The political becomes institutional. The institutional becomes historical. And here's something else that happens in situations like this. Something I've observed over many years watching these kinds of crises unfold. The uncertainty itself becomes a factor, a major factor. Businesses don't know how to plan. Do they maintain relationships with Trump-affiliated entities? Do they create distance? What's the risk calculation? Donors don't know how to allocate resources. Is this legal trouble manageable? Is it going to get worse? Should they commit more support or hold back? Political strategists don't know how to advise their candidates and office holders. Do they embrace Trump, keep their distance, try to navigate some middle path? And the public, regular Americans trying to understand what's happening in their country, they're caught between competing narratives, unsure what to believe, uncertain about what it all means. That uncertainty ripples outward. It affects markets. It affects political dynamics. It affects confidence in institutions. It's not just about the legal cases themselves. It's about the cloud of uncertainty they create and how that uncertainty affects everything around them. Now, I want to be clear about something. I'm not making predictions here. I'm not saying how this ends or what the outcomes will be. I don't know. Neither does anyone else, really. These cases are still playing out. Evidence is still being presented. Legal arguments are still being made. Judges and juries haven't rendered final verdicts. What I am saying is this: the situation is serious. The stakes are high. The implications extend far beyond one person's legal troubles. And because of that, because this matters for our institutions, our political system, our national conversation, it's crucial that we approach it with clear eyes and steady judgment. We can't afford to get swept up in unverified rumors, no matter how dramatic or compelling they sound. We can't afford to let fear or partisan bias fill in the blanks where facts should be. We need to stick with what's verified, what's documented, what's real. The ongoing legal cases, real. The institutional questions they raise, real. The uncertainty and the ripple effects, real. The dramatic rumors about secret testimony and emergency impeachments and inner circles collapsing, unverified, speculative, maybe true, maybe not, but not confirmed. And that distinction between what's real and what's rumored that matters. It matters a lot, because we make better decisions as individuals and as a society when we're working with accurate information, when we're clear about what we know and what we don't know. So yes, the situation is serious enough without the rumors. The verified facts alone paint a picture of significant legal and political pressure, institutional questions that need answering, and uncertainty that affects everyone. That's enough to pay attention to. That's enough to think carefully about. That's enough to take seriously. We don't need to add speculation on top of it. The reality is challenging enough on its own. And the wisest approach, the one that serves us best in the long run, is to stay grounded in that reality. Even when the rumors are more exciting, even when the speculation is more dramatic, because at the end of the day, it's the truth that matters. Not the stories we tell ourselves, not the fears we imagine, just the facts as they emerge in their own time. That's the standard worth holding ourselves to. Even when it's hard, even when we're impatient for answers, the truth is worth waiting for. Always has been, always will be. That is why you see concern growing even without any confirmed emergency or collapse. You don't need drama for institutions to feel strain. You really don't. Institutions feel it whenever leadership is distracted. When the people who are supposed to be focused on governing or campaigning or running organizations are instead spending their days in legal meetings and court proceedings. They feel it whenever public trust wobbles. When people start questioning whether their leaders can be effective while fighting multiple legal battles. When confidence erodes, even just a little bit. And they feel it whenever legal processes take center stage. When the news isn't about policy or vision or accomplishments, but about indictments and hearings and legal maneuvering. That is simply how systems work. It's not dramatic, it's not a conspiracy, it's just the natural consequence of sustained legal pressure on prominent figures. The machinery still runs, but it runs less smoothly. The gears still turn, but with more friction. Things still function, but not at full capacity. And people notice. They feel it, even if they can't always articulate exactly what's different. Now, let me bring this back to you, the viewer at home, because that's who really matters here. You're the one trying to make sense of all this. You're the one sorting through headlines and social media posts and conflicting narratives, trying to figure out what's actually happening. And here's the thing, you don't need legal jargon to understand this. You don't need a law degree or a background in constitutional procedure. You don't need political spin from either side trying to convince you that everything is either a complete witch hunt or an unprecedented crisis. You just need the simplest version of the truth. So here it is, plain and simple. A former president is facing multiple verified criminal and civil cases. That's fact number one. Not speculation, not rumor, documented fact. The cases exist. They're proceeding through the courts. There are charges. There are lawyers. There are hearings scheduled. His spouse, Melania, could legally be compelled to testify in theory because spousal privilege has limits. That's fact number two. The legal framework exists for that to happen. Courts have the authority to compel testimony from spouses in certain circumstances, particularly in serious criminal matters. But right now, and this is important, we don't have verified confirmation that she has testified or been subpoenaed. Could it happen? Yes. Has it been proven to have happened? No, not yet, anyway. So those are the facts. Clear, simple, unadorned by speculation or dramatic interpretation. What is real is the legal strain. Multiple cases, multiple jurisdictions, millions in legal fees, constant demands on time and attention. That's all very real, very documented, very measurable. What is real is the political pressure, the way these legal cases affect campaign operations, the way they influence donor decisions, the way they shape public perception and political strategy. All of that is observable and real. And what is real is the historical weight of having a former president under this much investigation at the same time. We haven't seen something quite like this before. Not at this scale. Not with this many simultaneous cases. Not with someone who's also actively seeking political office again. That's unprecedented. And unprecedented situations create their own kind of pressure, their own kind of uncertainty. Those are the realities. Those are the things we can verify and discuss honestly without resorting to speculation or drama. And here is something history does teach us, something worth paying attention to. When legal pressure piles up around a major public figure, the system slows down, tightens up, and takes caution. That happened with Nixon. The Watergate investigation wasn't resolved overnight. It took years. Testimony, evidence gathering, court battles, congressional hearings, a slow, grinding process that eventually led to resignation, but only after a long period of investigation and institutional response. It happened with Clinton. The investigations that led to his impeachment didn't happen in a few weeks. They built over time: legal proceedings, testimony, political maneuvering, and ultimately a Senate trial that resulted in acquittal. But the whole process took years to unfold fully. It has happened with governors, senators, and cabinet officials who faced serious legal scrutiny. The process becomes the story, not just the outcome, but the process itself, the investigations, the hearings, the legal arguments, the institutional responses. And that process takes time. It demands attention. It creates uncertainty while it's ongoing. So what should you do with all of this? Well, here's my advice, and it's pretty straightforward. Stay calm. I know that's easier said than done, especially when the headlines are screaming and everyone on social media has a hot take. But panic doesn't help. Drama doesn't clarify. Anxiety doesn't make you better informed. Calm allows you to think clearly, to evaluate information carefully, to distinguish between what's verified and what's speculation. Stick to verified facts. When you see a claim, ask yourself, is this documented? Is this coming from a credible source? Is this something I can verify through official channels? If the answer is yes, then factor it into your understanding. If the answer is no, then treat it as unconfirmed speculation, no matter how compelling it sounds. Do not let rumors write the narrative for you. This is crucial, because rumors are easy. They're exciting. They spread fast. They give us the illusion of knowing more than we actually know. But they're often wrong, or partially wrong, or true in a limited way that gets exaggerated beyond recognition. You deserve better than that. You deserve to have your understanding based on facts, not on what someone claimed they heard from someone who supposedly knows someone. Remember, legal cases move slowly. It's frustrating, I know. We live in a world of instant information, instant reactions, instant gratification. We want answers now. But the legal system doesn't work that way. It can't work that way, not if it's going to be fair and thorough and get things right. There are procedures. There are timelines. There are appeals and motions and discovery processes. All of it takes time. Courts speak clearly when the time comes. They issue rulings. They publish opinions. They make their decisions part of the public record. And when they do, we'll know. We'll have clarity. We'll have official, verified information to work with. Until then, we're mostly watching the process unfold, and that requires patience, and institutions, even when strained, tend to correct themselves. This is something I've observed over many, many years. Our institutions aren't perfect. They're run by humans, and humans make mistakes. They can be slow, they can be frustrating, they can seem dysfunctional at times, but they have a remarkable ability to self-correct over time. Checks and balances kick in. Accountability mechanisms engage. The system may bend, but it's designed not to break. That doesn't mean everything always works out perfectly. It doesn't. But it does mean that the institutional frameworks we have, the courts, the constitutional processes, The oversight mechanisms, they're more resilient than they sometimes appear in moments of crisis. Here's something else worth remembering, something I've found to be true time and time again. The truth rarely shouts. It doesn't. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't demand your attention with all caps headlines and breathless speculation. The truth arrives quietly, step by step, in filings, in rulings, in hearings, in the written record. It emerges through official channels, through documented processes, through verifiable sources. It takes its time. It doesn't rush. It unfolds at the pace of institutions and legal procedures, which is slower than we'd like, but more reliable than the alternative. Keep your eyes there, not on the noise. The noise will always be there. It's louder, it's more immediate, it's more exciting, but it's also less trustworthy, less accurate, less useful for actually understanding what's happening. The official record, the court filings, the judicial rulings, the verified statements from named sources, that's where the truth lives. That's where you'll find the information you can actually rely on. So where does all this leave us? Well, with a clearer picture, I hope, a more grounded understanding. Yes, a former president is facing serious legal challenges. That's real and significant. Yes, those challenges create strain on institutions and uncertainty in the political landscape. That's natural and expected. Yes, there are a lot of rumors flying around about testimony and impeachments and collapses, but most of those remain unverified. What we know for certain is enough to pay attention to, enough to take seriously. We don't need to add speculation on top of it. And what we should do is stay informed through reliable sources, remain patient as the legal processes unfold, and resist the temptation to treat rumors as facts just because they're dramatic or because they fit what we want to believe. That's the approach that serves us best as individuals trying to understand our world, as citizens trying to participate meaningfully in our democracy, as people who care about truth and accuracy and making good decisions based on solid information. It's not as exciting as some of the alternatives, I'll grant you that. But it's honest, it's grounded, and in the long run, it's the only approach that actually helps us understand what's really happening. Because the truth matters more than the drama, more than the speculation, more than the noise. The truth matters, and it's worth waiting for. Listen, I appreciate you taking the time to work through all of this with me. I know it's not simple. I know the situation is complex, and the information landscape is confusing. But if you found this helpful, if it gave you some clarity, some framework for thinking about what's happening, well, I'd be grateful if you'd like and subscribe. It helps me reach more people who are trying to make sense of things, who want honest analysis without the spin, who value facts over speculation. And I'll keep doing my best to bring you that kind of content, clear, honest, grounded in what we can actually verify. See you in the next one. And until then, stay informed, stay calm, and stick with the facts.